Welcome to Dear Art Producer, a podcast connecting the photography and video community with art producers. Drawing on her agency experience some years ago, photography agent Heather Elder penned an open letter to art producers discussing the finer points of working with one another. This podcast takes that idea and will introduce you to different art producers, share the stories of their diverse career paths, explore what it means to stay relevant, and examine industry topics such as marketing, estimating, directing, websites, and more.
Hi, welcome to Dear Art Producer. I am your host, Heather Elder, and I thought it would be interesting to expand on the Dear Art Producer format and start conversations with other roles in the creative process. So today we welcome Jim Carlton, the former Chief Creative Officer of Geometry in Chicago. He is now a creative consultant working with Ariel Investments. Jim and I first met on the set of a Lee Bice shoot for McDonald's when he was the EVP Creative Director at ARC Worldwide. And I always admired how he and Lee worked together. So when I thought about expanding the podcast, he was one of the first people I invited. Welcome. So happy to have you here today.
So great to be here, Heather. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I loved our little catch up about our kids and where they are in their lives and how they're giving us gray hair. And
but we wouldn't trade them in.
No, we wouldn't trade them in for the world. But it was nice to feel that I wasn't alone. So thank you for letting me know I'm not doing it wrong.
We could do a podcast on that.
We absolutely, oh my God, we totally could. I was interviewing somebody yesterday who's sitting right here, and she had an Apple Watch on. And all of a sudden, her daughter started talking. And she was like, oh my God, how did you get on here? And we were cracking up because her daughter's 12 and wanted to know who her teacher was because all of her friends were finding out who her teacher was. So literally, while we were recording, the daughter was chiming in. It was really cute. So even
you used to get that in the mail.
Yep. You used
to wait.
Absolutely.
Now everything is at a moment's notice.
And immediate, right?
Immediate,
and she needed to know. So it was cute. We had a little special guest yesterday on the podcast.
Awesome. So. I don't think that'll happen with my.
No, probably not. They should. Yeah, mine too. Well, I thought before we talk about the creative process, which is an obvious thing to talk about with you, I wanted our listeners to get to know you a little bit. So my first question to you has to do with inspiration. And I know that your job has always been surrounded by creativity, right? You have to be creative every day. The people around you have to be creative every day. And whether it is for a project or maybe managing a department, I'm curious, it's kind of an obvious question, but where do you find your inspiration to do all of that and stay creative?
Yeah, it's actually a great question. And I think, I look at it in two ways, and I think they're both equally important. One is active and one is a passive sort of, looking for inspiration. I think the passive is enjoying what's around you. I think Chicago is an amazing place to be inspired. Just today, like getting to work, I have to take the train downtown. It takes 20 minutes right there. The people watching is pretty amazing and inspiring. And so many things will click, whether you're thinking about a creative assignment or not. Then to get on the water taxi to, get to the other side of the city towards the lake. And it's beautiful. I mean, it's the landscape, the nature, the architecture. We're a passionate city when it comes to architecture. Food last night.
Right. We were just talking about that.
All the places we were going to eat and, they're all inspiring. So whether you, enjoy the movies, and that's another one, like Crazy Rich Asians.
Right.
Lately, I can't get enough of it. But the music in that movie,
Awkwafina and Farewell was amazing. So you need to go see that too.
We want to see that next. So
okay.
That's
not to digress, but
the music in there, is I think inspiring. The credits at the end, so
you're obviously very aware of what's around you, and you soak it all in.
Exactly, and I try to zone out at the same time because I'm there to enjoy the medium, whatever it is, and everyone has whatever it is they're into. Whatever makes you happy, feed that. That's the soul of I think creativity and where it comes from. But then there's the active part, so that was passive.
Yeah.
So then I think there's the active part, which is, study up a little bit. I love Contagious magazine because it really breaks down interesting, creative, successful programs by insight, by data, by analytics. You really learn
I haven't heard of this.
It's so great. It's a great subscription. It's a physical, but it's also a digital, of course, publication. And I really love it. And I really encourage people to look at it and to look at cases and it's a dream of mine to get in Contagious.
And how do you get in?
An honor. Well, I think you can pitch them, but your idea has to be great.
Okay.
It has to be effective. It has to be cool. It has to be, buzzworthy. That or, award ceremonies can, for example. And I'm not nuts for awards, but I do like that what awards do is aggregate great work.
Yeah.
My favorite thing when I go to Cannes is to sit in the basement at the Palais and look at all the work.
Yeah.
And I get depressed.
Yeah.
I get mad.
Yeah.
I get jealous. I did that, I feel like. But, wishing and wanting and being inspired and doing it are two different things, which I think we'll get into more later. So that's basically how I look at inspiration. I think there is the enjoyment, the passive, just let it soak in, whatever it is that inspires you. But then it's you got to do some homework.
I think you're right. And the same thing for me, where I have to stay inspired. You said you love your city. Like when I met today, I was just like, oh my God, I love your city. Mm-hmm. And I'm feeling really inspired getting out of my own office, my own everyday to-do list, and talking to people and meeting new people and interviewing people for the podcast. Like that is right now is keeping me really inspired because there's so many changes going on in our industry. I'm feeling like I literally have my finger on the pulse of it. And I love that. And I leave here thinking of new ideas, which is great.
I think you hit the nail on the head. It's about people. Mm-hmm. When I was with Geometry, we had offices all across North America. We had an office in Akron. I loved Akron.
Right.
I could get as excited about Akron as I could in Chicago for some of the same reasons.
Yeah.
There's some architecture. Right. There's lots of nature. But the people are cool. They're cool people
everywhere. Yeah. And you just have to keep your eyes open.
Exactly.
You really do.
You do.
And I think we're very in a fortunate career that we're expected to keep our eyes open, and we're in it because we want to keep our eyes open. Like it's an easy thing for us to do.
Exactly.
Well, tell me, what's something that people might be surprised to hear about you or learn about you?
Funny. This question cracks me up, and I'm going to probably disappoint you in the end. But I used to do this when I was with ARC at Leo Burnett. I would do once or twice a year, I would do lunches for all the new creative recruits that would come in. And then it kind of grew beyond that. Strategy would get involved and some account people.
People heard it was fun.
And I would have, they were all new employees. And we'd sit around at one point during the lunch, and it was for that reason to find out, hey, what's weird about you? Because we think that weird is a good thing. Embrace your weird. And this one particular lunch that I had, I was floored. Every other answer was unbelievable. I had one woman who was a creative, who was a phenomenal singer, and loved to perform, but she could only do it in the dark. And she would have concerts
in the dark,
in a dark room. Like she loved having her family, relatives, things like that. And if we could have controlled the shades, she would have been game for it.
Oh, that's so
I had another
funny.
guy who was, I guess technically he wasn't dead, but he was clinically, all his vitals were gone for about a minute.
Wow.
And he suffered severe brain trauma, but came out of it.
Oh my
and
gosh.
was sitting in our office. So I'm always comparing my answers to
I was going to say, what was you had to have had an answer.
And I've already let Crazy Rich Asians out of the bag.
Right.
I'm obsessed with that movie. I cannot get enough of it.
That wedding scene is incredible.
Yeah, but it's total eye candy, and it's a checkout movie, but there's a lot of great stuff about it. But I think, what else? I think people are shocked or maybe surprised when they find out I'm Jewish.
Okay.
I think I don't exactly have the most, I think I'm the only Jew with the name James Francis Carlton. So I kind of like that. It's sort of a jujitsu move to just sit there and see what happens. But it is interesting.
Oh, that's funny. So my maiden name is Steinmetz. Everybody thought I was Jewish growing up. So I think the converse, people were surprised to find out that I wasn't Jewish.
So super interesting too. And I sort
Which is German. So.
And a lot of Jewish names are German.
Exactly.
Stern, Stein. But it's funny, I converted when my son, he's my youngest, was born. And it's interesting, and the reason I converted, and there was no real pressure to do so, but I started feeling like an outsider in my own family. Because we did decide that we would agree to raise our children Jewish. And, I was loving it. It was all great. But it is very interesting when your kids are growing and suddenly you're seeing the world through a lens that you never lived through.
Right. Oh, that's interesting.
And so I think everybody should convert to something for a month or so. It would be a really cool program. I think it would make us all a lot better and compassionate people.
Absolutely. Yeah. Opening your eyes to another culture, another way of life, another religion, anything. Then
try it.
Imagine I can only imagine the inspiration you've felt from that.
It should be a course.
It should be a course. I like that. The next podcast.
Exactly. We have 2 new podcasts.
We're going to be busy. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about obstacles and your career. And I know that, we all have faced them. And when we do face them, we think, oh my God, this is it. This is the end. How do I get through this? And of course, we get through to the other side and we feel that we've succeeded and it was probably the best thing that's ever happened or we've learned from it. Yeah. Is there a story you can share with us that, what happened to you and how did you persevere?
I think probably the biggest that's maybe important to share because it really, I think, helped set the course for me and my career was probably a month before I was supposed to go to Hofstra University on Long Island for business. I sort of had my version of a panic attack and realized I was not going to be happy doing that. I went to a very small public school. We had about 300 people in our graduating class. So it really didn't have a lot to offer like my kid's school does.
Right.
It's almost a mini college, the offerings and the things that kids now know that they can do. But I took some fine arts classes and that was it. Either you painted or you were a doctor, lawyer, plumber, whatever it was. I really didn't expand my horizons on what it is I could be. But at one point I realized I did not want to be that. So I did a very difficult thing and did not go through with it. Then went to community college for 2 years.
Wow.
At that point in time when I decided to do that, I remember my mom saying, recommending I join the Army.
Oh, no.
So it wasn't really supported. You know what I mean? And also they weren't paying for it. And I think that's what gave me, so I think it was fear that drove me to do that, fear of not being happy or fear of the unknown. Like, oh my God, what is all this? I at least should be happy. Like, thank God I knew enough that I should be happy doing what I'm doing. So to figure it out, I decided to go to community college. And within that 2-year span, and it was the best thing I ever did, I started paying attention to the things around me. I remember seeing billboards and questioning why they were even there. They were ugly. They were messing up beautiful landscape, pine trees where I come from, beach area. I'm like, what the hell? At least they could be beautiful at the very least.
Yeah.
And then I found out that was a thing, that people do that. And I remember thinking I could do better than that. And that's where design started becoming
important
thing to me. And ended up researching, not online, but through books and things.
Right.
And found out about FIT, SVA, Pratt, Parsons, and ended up at FIT because it was a state school. It was just accredited. And it was the cheapest, quite frankly. But the second best thing I ever did was going to FIT. And I studied fine arts for a year, which was a dream. I worked at PJ Clark's, made a lot of money in the city, made so much money, and did fine arts for a year. And I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. And then went into the design program. So I took a 2-year program in 1 year. So I caught up. I was able to catch up. Took an advertising program and got my bachelor's degree in that and in graphic design.
And what was your first job?
So my first job out, and that was the other thing, working at PJ Clark's, I was working on 55th and 3rd. So it was the heart of, Madison Avenue and advertising industry. And I had been waiting on a gentleman and I thought it was his girlfriend, but it ended up being his secretary. Both. And all this time, and PJ Clark's is the kind of place a lot of famous people come in. So you just learn, not also great training for me. Of
course.
You learn to leave them alone, just be there when they need you. So after 4 years of serving this man and lots of people coming up and kissing his ass, he had asked me, Jim, what is it you do? Because you're not a waiter. That's not your thing. And that I had fears about that too, because I was making so much money. Absolutely.
I know.
I was going to take a pay cut. I knew it, no matter what I did next. So I really had a fear that I was going to be a waiter the rest of my life. So fear is what drives me.
That's great. It's good to know.
But it turns out he was a recruiter for the advertising business, but a very high executive recruiter for advertising. And he sent out notes to Y&R Siegel and Gale.
Oh my gosh.
I think Gray was the third. And he sent letters. This is when you had to send a letter.
Yeah.
And he sent the letters, and I lived in Hoboken at the time. This was in Manhattan. Within 2 days, I had responses back. I had letters back. So this guy was a mover and a shaker. And Y&R was one of them. And that's where I ended up.
That's where
so I ended up working in Y&R's design division.
Okay.
At the time, it was called CYB. Kato Yasamura. This guy, Matsu Yasamura, started it. And in fact, we were across the street from Y&R. But I worked on amazing accounts.
Oh my God.
Worked on Adidas. I got to do sneaker concepts before people were really doing that. No one bought them,
but you got to do it.
So much fun. Yeah. Worked on Rolling Rock and
I loved that you were a waiter.
Yeah.
Anybody who listens to this podcast knows that I talk about that a lot.
Really?
And the parallels. I was a waitress forever and made so much money, and it was so hard to stop being a waitress. It was like the golden handcuffs, but I would see the people who were waitresses their whole life, and I knew I didn't want that. Yeah. And I learned so much being a waitress and hearing when other people chime in that was one of their early jobs. I recognize all the things that you learned when you did that.
It was the best experience, going into the real world. It was a great audition to
Absolutely.
be able to do that. And I remember hardcore people at the restaurant saying, you're never going into advertising. They would say that. And I would work till 4 a.m.
Mm-hmm.
And there were times I'm walking out of here with $400 in my pocket.
Yeah.
And they might be right, but it did scare me. I was like, you know what? No, because I don't want to be that at the end of the day either.
Every once in a while, I think, well, I always have waitressing.
Yeah, I do too. Or bartending.
Absolutely.
I can do bartending. And I'll tell you, some of those I don't want a black, brown cloud on the waiting industry.
No, it's fantastic.
Because it is fantastic. And some of these people at PJ Clark's, they were lifers. Now it's different because Let Us Entertain You came in and brought it up. And I was there when they were taking notes and pictures and then copied it and built on it. But there were lifers there who made awesome bonuses.
Oh, I bet.
They would make 10 grand bonus. Wow. Like that does not happen.
That doesn't happen. No, that doesn't happen anymore. Wow.
But
that's amazing.
Yeah, it was good.
Well, talking about the industry a little bit, right? Where you got started and where we are now, right? There are so many changes that have happened.
Yeah.
What do you see happening at the agency level? What do you see happening at the client level?
Yeah.
From where you sit?
And I love that you're asking that question. You're obviously very in tune.
Yeah.
You're hearing things.
A little scary.
I'd love to know what you're hearing. There's a lot of reorgs and new ways of looking at people growing their business going on right now, everywhere. I think, and geometry was no exception. Like everybody is rethinking the way they're doing business. And there's so many reasons for it, but the ones that are close to me that I've seen, just sort of reveal themselves over the last few years. One is, I think it's caught up to advertising. So I think a lot of our clients suffered this 2, 3, 4 years ago, 5 years ago when 3G, for example, was buying everything up and then going in and slashing marketing budgets, marketing departments. And in some cases for a very good reason. Like, they were able to do that and still function. Although Kraft Heinz today, I think is having a problem, when it comes to marketing.
A lot of people are.
Yeah, exactly. And if you didn't have a 3G acquiring you started behaving like it, I think. And McDonald's is another example, which I'm pretty close to and worked with, for about 15 years. They totally cut their marketing department. I'd say in half as well. And their stock kept going up.
Right.
So, so a lot of it is justified, but it did trickle down, I think. And I think eventually those are budgeting dollars that will then catch up to the agencies. And that's money that's not spent. Include what's going on with digital, what's going on with technology, reduction in revenue spent on TV. People aren't printing money for their marketing budgets.
No.
It goes from one place to another. And whether it's, through services or through people, if whatever's being restructured or reorged, the money has to go to where are they really finding the people. And in this case, the phone technology, people are spending their money big time there. So we're seeing it go away from the things we're used to. And as a result, I think everyone's fighting for the same breadcrumbs.
Yes.
you see traditional above the line agencies going down to get things that are more maybe experiential. I think that's sort of the new battleground.
And project based.
Yeah, and project based. I'm super into experiential. I do think it's the theater, you know. If TV is film, then experiential to me is theater.
Oh, that's great.
And the content that you can get from that is also then great, can be great film content that you use later, just repurposed in a different way than it was from TV. And experiential really is owned by below the line as well. So you're seeing both go after the same kind of things, I think, for the first time ever. And there isn't going to be a line anymore. The lines are blurring, and I think that's a good thing.
Because from where I'm sitting, I see the creative project spanning so many different, like it can be executed in so many different ways. You can go to a traditional agency and ask, have an agency of record. You can have project based. You can go to a production company now, because a production company is starting to set themselves up in a way that they can service these clients. You can go to a digital content creation. You can go to a Google or a Facebook. They'll help you with that. You can take it internal as a client and a brand. And agency creatives, at least many that have been talking to, are starting to be more open to the idea of working for a brand that they never were before. So now you have these projects that are so different than they ever were, and so many different types of people trying to get them. And it's fascinating. It's affecting every level of my business too. It's
so interesting. It is going to, settle at one point.
It will.
But I feel you're dead on, and I feel like everybody is getting into everyone else's chili. Like, everyone's a generalist. No one's a specialist. Like, look at, just to keep following your thread, look at the consulting agencies. They're hiring creatives. They're becoming more creative and the agencies are becoming more data and analytics.
My husband started an agency 12, 13 years ago in San Francisco that sold to Deloitte. Consulting agency. Droga 5 just sold to Accenture. So, he was one of the first. Droga followed suit. Like, who would have thought Droga would have done that? Or Heat, right? They were they are a creative agency. But now the consulting agencies are trying to own more of the
everyone is becoming everyone else.
What's the word? Channel. So everyone's being, and I'm finding that in my photographers, right? In the very, very beginning, when I first started repping for photographers, I would be able to represent a category. Here is my car photographer. Here is my food photographer. Here is my portrait photographer. And here is my still life photographer. And then here was people. Right? Nobody got into each other's space. And then, 2000 and whatever hit, and nobody had any work, and everybody had to, now we start to do libraries of images. And suddenly my landscape and portrait photographer was doing more lifestyle work, and my conceptual photographer needed to do more lifestyle work. Like, everybody started to encroach on each other's spectrum, where they were on the spectrum. And it's all fine, and it all works out, but people have to be a little bit more general. It's a major shift.
And it's just interesting to hear your perspective as well. Like, it's happening everywhere. I do think it's happening in every industry.
I do too.
Not just creative.
Right.
I think, I think it's technology. I think it's speed of doing business. Everyone's always on. I think things are more difficult. And I don't mean that as a woe is me.
No.
But things are much more difficult to do and get done. And I think the decisions we have to make are much more difficult. Because the money hasn't really changed. You still have the same pot.
You do.
If not less. But you have so many more channels now.
And so many more things you have to get for that budget. Okay, so here's another question. You worked at boutique agencies, and you've worked at agencies that were owned by large holding companies. And maybe they were at different times in the industry's timeline, so that might be a reason for the differences. But just in general, like, what are some of those differences then, now? Like,
first of all, I'm so grateful that I did have the experience working at boutique, design firms, and then working at, big advertising agencies, holding companies. is pretty amazing because I was able to bring all of it at one point to everything I'm doing, which has been great. But I think the thing that was great about, and it was early days for me, which was great about, work even at Y&R, it was really more of it felt like a boutique, even though we had such, mass around us. But you were in control as a designer. You're in control of everything. You're in control of the client. Usually you're the one dealing with the client. You're in control of the art buying. So if I need to get an illustrator or a photographer, I'm sort of doing the research on that. Reps became a thing that I dealt with as an agency got bigger, which was interesting for me at first. That was a thing that I had to get over because I really did enjoy sourcing.
Yeah, that's great.
I mean? To me, it was part of the creative process. Writers, what printers, and then I started working with reps over time, and then I did enjoy it because as you get busier, if you want to get ahead, you're going to get busier, you're going to be doing more things. You need to rely on those people as if they're teammates. Yeah. And I did. And I worked with some of the best, which was a lot of fun. Then, going into bigger agencies, and the way I got into a holding company was I started with a company called Frankel.
Oh my gosh.
Chicago.
I just had breakfast with someone who was there.
Funny.
Lisa Kunst.
Yeah. Lisa.
She said to say hi.
Yeah.
She said to say hi.
Hi, Lisa. One of the best places. That's where I really got a dose of the importance of culture, by the way. Bud Frankel, who ran it, who recently passed away, was an amazing businessman, but he also got the importance of people. And his role in making sure you had a good life, Yeah. So it was really special. But Frankel, like a lot of companies, was acquired. We were acquired by Publicis at the time. A year later, they acquired Leo Burnett and then put us together, in the same building, which was a gift for me because it was almost like going back to school. So being exposed to Leo Burnett and, brand creativity like that, they're motherfucker creatives,
right.
And you learn trial by fire. I will be forever grateful for. So it was good to amp up the creative side.
And you think having been at an agency that was owned by a holding company, that process allowed you to kind of step up your game.
It let me go in and partner. Yeah. Where I would never have had that opportunity. And the beauty was at that time, Leo Burnett was still very much the Leo Burnett that people dream about and think about. And it was just a really special place. So that was great. And then eventually I left Leo Burnett and ARC and went to WPP and worked for Geometry, which was even bigger. They're the biggest conglomerate. And, something I learned from a boss of mine, Susan Cradle, was, embrace sort of the abundance of a holding company, which meant go seek out the talent and bring it to your clients, seek out the people,
Right. And they had the resources that allowed you to do that.
If we're going to be big, and if people are going to accuse us of being big, like it's a bad thing, then let's go find the things that a small agency can't do. And that's resources, and that's bringing things that you would have to pay or you wouldn't even know about, we're all, and at WPP it was really like a flea market, over there at the Mart. Yeah. You would just, walk around and see all these names of companies. Wow. And if
that's funny.
Once, got your attention, figure out what they do, they might be able to help you and something you're working on.
You mentioned culture when you were talking about Frankel.
Yeah.
And when I was reading your bio, one of the things in your bio is that one of the things you were most proud of at your time at Geometry was helping bring that sense of culture there. What does that mean? And how did you do that? Did it affect the work? Like, what is that?
Yeah, so it was interesting because that was something that they were looking for, someone to help them with the culture. And such a great opportunity. What's cool about Geometry at the time was they were like a lot of even agencies within the holding company. They are several companies that come together. So Geometry was G2, was Ogilvy Action, was a couple of direct firms, like all these things. Yeah, that
so you're not quite sure what to do. Parts and
So there's really not a lot of focus on this is who we are, this is what we do. there's a lot of things you have to work with. And by the way, that's revenue.
Right.
So make it work,
Yeah.
But with that comes different cultures. So you have people who are used to behaving one way with maybe an Ogilvy, people who are used to working one way with a Gray, and for good reason. Like they were treated a certain way and were used to it. Now they're coming together and they all can't be treated different. They have to be treated the same. So that was the opportunity. And by the time
and you had such a positive experience at Frankel, so it was
Yeah,
probably really
so
easy for you to
I could see
vision it.
Yeah.
Maybe it might not have been easy to execute,
Exactly.
but to envision it.
And I could see it. And I could see that it was about people and bringing people on board and actually making people accountable. Like it wasn't me. I shall be, the culture guru.
Right.
It's like, how do you get people, empower them to kind of own the place? So it was probably 2 years. Geometry was around for about 2 years by the time I got into it. So part of it was getting better already just by people naturally leaving and doing other things. The more you bring in new talent, new people, suddenly that's the culture.
Right.
And that's where you want to focus. So I definitely saw that as an opportunity. Bringing them on board was a lot easier than trying to change other people's perceptions. And at the end of the day, I do think I based it on the work, which is other things I learned. Hey, because there's a lot of swirl.
Yeah.
The bigger the agency, the more the swirl. There's swirl everywhere. And it was just important to keep it about the work. Because if it's good.
Well, and that's the reason everyone is in the business,
exactly.
right? So it's the language they all share.
Yep, exactly. So I got to work on that. I got to work with great people. I absolutely did not do it on my own. I had great people who worked with me, who owned different parts of groups, who helped with the code. They had a good idea about something to do with the team. Let's do it. We had our first offsite a year after I got there in Miami, which again was just the agency saying, hey, we're investing in 300 of you. Let's go down to Miami. Let's talk about the business. Let's talk about aligning on goals. And then let's talk about executing them and then get back and do it. That was amazing. Like to be able to do that was felt so
I
good.
bet.
Well,
and I'm sure you saw the results in the work that was created afterwards.
And I felt we were winning awards, Effies were a big important thing. That was something we knew we could go after. I worked with my partner CEO, Carl Hartman. And I don't know if you know him or Marta Larac, my strategy partner. We decided we would be the number one firm awarded, in Effies.
That's great.
And it's audacious. It's like kind of...
That's a big goal.
But it's a goal,
Yeah.
And but the important thing was I felt like I could do it with those two. And I wanted everyone to feel like that and that's part of the culture as well.
Wow.
Like, do we have that? And we did it. So for 4 years in a row, Geometry has been the most awarded agency in Shopper Effies, which is pretty great. And we've shortlisted 2 or 3 times for national Effies.
Congratulations!
And for the Grand Effie, which is
huge.
Huge.
Yeah.
So
that's great.
Goal achieved.
Well, now you're at Ariel Investments, and they're trying to rebrand themselves. And I'm wondering why they chose now to refresh. And does refresh for them include evolving how they exist in the marketplace? Right? We've talked about how everybody's trying to stay relevant. I'm guessing Ariel Investments is trying. Needs to do something now.
Everyone's doing it.
Everyone's doing it.
And they should be doing it.
Of course.
Everyone should be paying attention. Part of it for me too, I'm so excited. Like, aren't you starting to hear it? Like, people are talking about Generation Z as a thing.
Yes.
So it's kind of exciting, So I think with that comes, hey, what's going to come? Like, we're talking about millennials. I'm kind of tired about the millennial talk because they're not one thing anymore.
No. There's lots of little millennials in there.
But these are exciting because they are one thing.
They are.
So it's kind of fun. But back to Ariel, like, first of all, they're a phenomenal company. And what I find interesting, just talking about what I'm seeing with holding companies and a lot of agencies is the accountability to the dollar, to the penny. And you're seeing, corners be cut and people are seeing how far they can cut before someone cries uncle. What I find super interesting is I'm with an investment firm that's about money and they're thinking, how can I be more creative?
That's great.
And I feel so fortunate and grateful. And I couldn't pick, if I tried, a better brand and a better bunch of people. Melody Hobson, who's co-CEO, which is part of, I think, the shift in the refresh is what I'm calling it. And her and John Rogers, who's the chief investment officer, they're co-CEOs. I think in most industries, that's a two-headed monster.
Yeah.
But with them,
it works.
It is about two very complementary people who have come together and over the last 28 years together have grown that firm to be $2 billion in assets to I think it's like a little over 13.
That's amazing.
And they both have become major brands within themselves as people. So just like fascinating working with them. Melody happens to also, besides running the business side of Ariel, she's vice chair of the board of Starbucks. She's on the board of Estee Lauder.
So she's surrounded by a lot of creative companies. Of course, she'll want her
Museum of Narrative Arts.
Wow.
She was chairman of the board of DreamWorks before she took them to be acquired. Check her out and do a podcast with her. Her resume will blow you away. But she knows creativity. And by the way, what's awesome about Ariel as well, when I first moved to Chicago, that was my very first client I worked on.
Oh, that's
and
funny.
I helped them with their identity and their communications. And
I love it. It all comes full circle.
It's so amazing.
Yeah.
Like I really feel fortunate.
Well, you said something earlier about this idea that like everyone needs to refresh, right? We're doing that in our own group as well. And it used to be that our photographers in our group could, have their images speak for themselves. You wanted to hire this photographer just because they had this great image or their category of work, they were at the top of their game. And we're working, even on the photographer level, I'm working with them individually to figure out what it is that they care about. What is it that they give a damn about? What is it that makes them who they are and what is their brand? And it's hard because these guys are very visual. So just like with the companies and brands directly, like it is hard to get them to like rethink about who they are and what they mean to their marketplace. And I mean, I feel fortunate that they're allowing me to do this, but it's not just our group that's doing it. It's everybody is rethinking who they are right now.
Exactly. I see it.
Yeah.
I see it in your industry. Yeah. Cause I'm maybe not as much as the art buyers at a bigger agency, but I see it. I see. Well,
and you and I have to evolve to stay relevant too. So, I mean, I thought of the podcast because I realized it's so hard to get into ad agencies and have an effective portfolio show. I still do it, but they're busy. People don't spend a lot of time talking. Creatives don't want to leave their desk. They'd rather look online. So I thought, how could I get into an agency and engage with people and connect with them and learn about what they're up to and provide something of value to them rather than need their time. Right. So I just think we are in a day and age where we need to constantly be evolving who we are and not think that, the last 20 years when we were all having fun and working hard is going to stay the same.
So different.
It is. It's different. All right. Well, let's talk a little bit about the creative process. What does the creative process look like from the creative side? I know that's kind of a big question.
It's a funny question for me because and it's not true. I feel like I've never thought of it any other way, but I have when I think about it. And it's been part of it.
And think about who listens to the podcast too, right? So what would be helpful for them to know about, like, you get this brief and you have a project or a client. How does it begin?
So here's the best thing. Like the first thing that I think about is, and any successful, great piece of work that's ever been done did start with a great brief. It started with constraints. It started with a fence around the creative. Because if you leave a bunch of creatives alone to figure something out, it'll never happen. It'll just never, ever happen. And I think, it's a time sort of answer for me. I think time is one of the things that's super interesting. If you give us too much time, it's not good. Right. If you give us too little time, that's not good either. So that's why, if you've got a good brief, if you've got a good problem, if you've got a good team, we're going to be in good shape. I I also, and that's why I really looked at that question when I first saw it, like a few times. I do count on everyone to be part of the creative process. Everyone is in service,
including the person
creativity.
who writes the brief.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because it's going to get us where we've got to be. At Geometry, I called it high functioning leadership teams. It's an account person, it's a creative person, it's a strategy person, and the client is sort of the fourth component to that. And they can switch out at any time. It could be production. Mm-hmm. If we don't have excellent execution, we're not going to win. Right. So know where and when the right people have to come and go, and also be accountable for your part, because people are counting on you. Right. Not because there's a gun to your head, but because I truly want great insights. Right. Because they will help. Talk about inspiration. I get inspired by really good planners. Mm-hmm. Like comedians to me are really good planners, right? Or strategists. Like you can hear the insights and everything they're saying. So I look at really good planners in the same way that I look at really good comedians. When they're giving it that good, it's a show. It's so good. So it's really about everyone being part of the creative process, and I'm not just saying that so I'm Mr. Inclusive, but it's super important.
No, it's really important. You have to do your job. You're there for a reason. You were hired for a reason. Yeah. And you also have to realize you're part of a team. Yep. It's not just one person making something creative.
I want you to want to be there. Yeah. And you'd be surprised. I think a lot of people are kind of coasting.
And how do people get your attention? Like the photographers or the people that you're going to hire for your experiential project.
So it's funny. I do count on my team, although it's different now because I am my team, right? As I work with Ariel, and I've got great people I'm going to be working with there as well. But when it comes to creative ideas, hey Jim, how are you going to do this now? You're so used to, just going down the hall and tapping people on the shoulder or giving someone a call. So that's, personally right now, that's kind of what I'm going through. But, when I was at an agency, it's interesting. I just got my last day at Geometry. I got a book in the mail from a photographer in Brooklyn, Jesse Dittmar. Mm-hmm. Oh, I like Jesse. And I've gotten tons of books from people. And this was a real book. It was his 2 book. Yeah. He's celebrating his 2nd year in business. And his work is phenomenal. Mm-hmm. But it was his note. It was his card. Yeah. It was all the things he did that really got my attention and made me want to work with him. Yeah. To the point where I called him and had a great conversation with him and then asked him to send me another book and to please address it to Melody Hobson because I'd like him to photograph, not just her, but the team when we get to the reframe. Right. So I'm thinking, way ahead because like Lee Beisch, I love people. Mm-hmm. I want great work, but I want to work with great people. I think it's a rat race. It is out there. Not every day is great. Right. We're all chasing for the same thing. We're all chasing for awards. We're chasing for the money. We're chasing for the great work and all that's great. But at the end of the day, it's the human race that I really want to win. And I know I'm going to look back. I already do so fondly of Lee and keep in touch with her. Right. And I want to work with her again because of the kind of person she is, the kind of way she pushed the work. Yep. But it was the way she did it. And that's a hard thing to bundle up for a rep and package out and put in a postcard. But what I loved about Jesse and the way I got the work was, I'm sure his rep did that for him.
Maybe not.
But she made him do it.
Right, she probably made him do it.
But when I wanted to get done to pricing, he quickly put me in touch with his reps.
That's funny.
All right,
that's very funny.
So, so it's so hard. I think it's actually so difficult what you do, especially for people like me, because in the beginning, I was anti-rep. Yeah. Because I thought this is what I should be doing. Right. But when you start working at a big agency, so some people grew up in a big agency, I didn't. Then oh my God, this our internal rep works with this other rep. Yeah. And they have not just donuts and bagels for us every other Friday, but they really can get who I need, you know, and show me things I would never have found on my own. So that's something I had grown into. And honestly, you were one of the only reps I really have ever worked with.
Oh, I'm honored.
And it's just because it happened in my career that way, but it's, no regrets,
Yeah.
I worked with Lee for a long time.
I hear this theme over and over again on the podcast, this idea of relationships and how important they are in this process.
Yeah.
And they're hard to make though, right? Because as a photographer, and I mean, I've been doing it for a long time, so I feel fortunate about the relationships that I've been able to develop. But for new photographers, it's very hard for them to get in the door places and to make those relationships. And even the photographers that have been around for a while never really had to make them in anticipation of getting work. They had the strong relationships because of the great work they did with people. But trying to be proactive in making relationships is really hard.
Yeah.
But it really is so important. And we all rely on them so much. So I just
Well, the other thing I've realized too is it took me a while, honestly, in my career to realize this. I thought everyone was a people person.
Right. Everybody's not.
There's the, IQ and EQ are very big right now on LinkedIn. It's a big theme.
That's very funny.
And I think I'm an EQ I like people.
Yeah.
So I connect, but we got to get the job done. But there are some people
who just are not.
I'm not saying they don't like people.
No, I know what you're saying.
But they don't respond to that. Right. And so it makes your job even harder. And I do think it's about talent. I think that what's that other way that you can get people who are talented and just they navigate differently, because I think reps by nature are
personable,
right? They
absolutely. And photographers by nature chose photography because they're visual.
Yeah.
Not all of them feel comfortable communicating on a creative call or writing a treatment, right? They are truly our visual people. That is their calling in life. So they do what they do because they can't imagine doing anything else.
Right.
I do what I do because they can't imagine doing anything else. So it's really hard sometimes for them to cross over. And
I think it gets back to the thing we were talking about, this co-CEO thing. I've dubbed it the buddy system because I think it's something they need to be pushing down to the entire organization. Like, what client wouldn't want
such a great idea.
In fact,
they complement each other, like the yin and the yang,
they have to
right?
be complementary because if I'm a client, maybe I have a point person, but I have this other thing that comes in once in a while and is interesting. And the other thing is interesting about Ariel is when they research, and they're about the long term. They're about slow and steady wins the race. They will look at companies, research companies, and that they think are very valuable. But when they take a dip and their stock goes down and others are running away, they will zero in on it and commit to it. And so they love undervalued, because they believe that it's going to be valuable. Mm-hmm. And they're right. In fact, their flagship fund has been, they've outperformed everyone the last 10 years.
A stock tip on the podcast.
Yeah.
An investment tip.
But I don't know if compliance would like that. But it's not a tip. It's just
we're just sharing.
It's something you can read in any paper. But it is that John Rogers, Melody Hobson team that I think has been so successful. And I think that's kind of what I think we all should be thinking about.
Absolutely.
Because we're dealing with,
I really feel like too, and it goes to this next question, which was about collaboration. Like you talk about being a true collaborator. And I really feel like in today's, where we're all trying to evolve, maybe you can't do it alone. Like, who is your person that you want to evolve with, and you want that person to take you into what the future of advertising is? So, or whatever your career is, like, who is that person? And you don't have to do it alone.
Right.
Like, it doesn't have to be competitive, or
it doesn't.
It should be symbiotic, and finding that person.
There is nothing better when you walk into an organization or a room and people really don't have an agenda except great work.
Right.
Doing something to move the needle, and give you credit when you didn't expect it. You know, it's just awesome. And that's sort of what I feel like I've got right now.
That's great.
And I think a good idea comes from anywhere. Brainstorms are under fire too. I don't know if you've seen that going back and forth. And I think, getting people in a room is a really good idea, especially, if I can get a variety of types of people, different points of view,
open mind.
Yeah, I don't need the same people, but if the more different, the more weirder, the better.
Yeah.
If I can get you all together. And brainstorms, I think they don't work when they're too democratic. I think someone's got to be,
somebody has to stand up and say the thing that might be a little bit, might scare you a little bit.
And I think I'll run with that. And some people I don't think can recognize a good idea in the heat of a quote unquote brainstorm. But I think the smart people are kind of sitting back saying, you know what, that was interesting. I'm going to take that back. So I think they have value. But,
absolutely.
But they are under fire.
So but before we end, I've thought I'd like to ask maybe one more question. People write to me all the time about the podcast, mostly photographers, asking about two things. One is how to stay relevant and how to get the attention of someone like you. So I think the answer to that would be relevant for a photographer, a director, a creative looking to get in the agency business, a client. So what would your piece, one or two pieces of advice for people who are trying to figure out how to stay relevant and how to get the attention of the people they want to pay attention?
Well, it's funny. I'll just go back to the Jesse Dittmar thing for a minute because he cut through the clutter, and it was so simple. So it was through. He had the cred, he had the work, but his approach was great and just very heartfelt and human. And I think making that human connection is important. I think again, it's at that level you're trying to crack, that higher level. Do your homework and make it meaningful, add value, give something away if you have to make your point or to get in. I think everyone's looking for a little value. Yeah. And I think if you're hunting for the right kind of person, they're going to take care of you. Right. But I think these days you got to give up a little. And I'm not saying give away the farm or put so much out, but give something of yourself. That's going to add value. You've just touched on absolutely everything we're doing in our group. Awesome. The idea that moving our photographers away from category-based or image-based to brand-based. And in order to figure out what their brand is, learning and understanding who they are, why they became photographers, what is it about their beliefs and values that make them the photographer that they are. Yeah. Therefore, when they reach out to you, or I reach out to you on their behalf, I'm telling you something truly authentic about them. I'm sharing something about them that isn't just, hey, look at this beautiful book of images I've put together. Like, insert photographer name here. Anybody can do that. Right. But instead, in Jesse's case, he created this, heartfelt, authentic thing that he sent you that spoke to you in a way that wouldn't have if it didn't come from who he was. I think, And I think he wrote like XO. Right. Which I'm like, who does that? I got to meet this guy, right? That's funny. That's great. He was good. But you're dead on. And without overusing the authentic word. I know sometimes that's a hard word. But it's the right word. I think you just got to do your homework if it's that level that you're looking at, because they're seeing a lot of stuff. And how should they think about staying relevant? Yeah, so it's so hard. Honestly, I think it's very hard. So I think Lee does a great job. So just going back to Lee. She does a great job. You do a great job. Thank you. Of sourcing the latest thing she's working on and getting it out there, whether it's print, whether it's online, whether it's Instagram, whatever the channel. She's there. I like also, again, that's why I like Lee. I got authentic Lee, know. With most photographers, I don't know a single photographer. There's another guy, Mark Petrelli, I worked with a lot. Doing portrait work, who, photographers are awesome people. Yeah, they really are. As a whole. Like, I never really thought of it as a class of people, but I can't think of one I don't like or would want to, hang out with and have a drink. So I think, all you can do is like maintain in the channels that you can. I think this podcast is a great idea because staying top of mind, you'd be surprised how I could have this conversation with you today. I love Lee to death. And then something come across the transom. The shiny object. Wait, what? No, or someone's asking me, Jim, who do I get? I'm like, I don't know. We got no time. We got no budget. But you do. And so that's what's great. But that is what's great about you and Lee. she's always on my radar.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And I think it goes back to what we started in the very beginning of the podcast, is this idea of inspiration and where you find it. Mm-hmm. And I would think, like, my advice to photographers, at least who are trying to stay relevant, or even creatives, is be really open to the inspiration around you and not be afraid to act or create based on something that is inspiring to you.
Give something. Yeah.
Give something.
And there's another trick.
Okay. What is it?
That Lee was really good at. She found my iPhone for me.
Oh.
So I am forever. You do not know that. And again, that's another podcast. I had almost a mental breakdown.
Oh my gosh.
Going from the restaurant that we were at to then San Francisco airport.
Oh my gosh.
In a bus. That I couldn't turn it around, which I tried.
Oh, that is so funny. All right. Well, I will remind Lee that she was indebted to you. You're indebted to her for that.
Find anyone's missing phone and they'll be
that's
grateful.
Great. Yeah. This was fantastic. You are the first creative that we've interviewed for this. And honestly, I've learned so much. And I think evolving what we're talking about on this podcast to include creativity and inspiration and changes in the industry from someone at your level, I hope is, and can only imagine, will be really insightful to everyone who listens. So thank you for being here.
Let's hope. Yeah. Thanks.
I appreciate it
so much, Heather.
Thanks for listening. In an industry where the rules are always changing, it's helpful to hear from those on the front line. Heather Elder is the visionary behind notesfromarepsjournal.com. Visit her website for industry updates, stunning photography and video, and the artist behind the work.